I feel like we need that song to get progressively faster and more exciting. Welcome everyone to our webinar. My name is Lexi. I'm just going to kick it off and hand this over to Claudia. But I hope you're excited for the Olympics to start. I know opening ceremony on Friday. If you want to tell us what country or what sports you're rooting for in the chat, feel free to participate. I am an ex-swimmer, so definitely interested and love Olympic swimming, but I will say I am fascinated by Olympic surfing. And they've got kind of that cruise ship going on where all the athletes are staying. So maybe those athletes lucked out. They're not in the Olympic Village, but they're offshore surfing. So should be really cool. But that's not why we're here today. We're here to talk about WordPress migrations, and we've got a great webinar planned for you all today. We're going to kind of take you through all of the WordPress migration options we offer and help with here at WP Engine. So we're just going to start with a brief welcome and introductions and a migrations overview. And then Kevin Hoffman is going to take you through WP Engine's migration options. And then Kevin and Claudia are going to, or sorry, John and Claudia are going to then take you through our managed migration services, which is a newer service that we're offering and is really great for agencies. If you're an agency, this webinar is directed at you. If you're not an agency, we are going to talk through all migration options and everything that we offer here at WP Engine. So with that being said, we've got three awesome speakers today. I'm going to have them introduce themselves kind of as they speak throughout the webinar. But that being said, we've got Claudia Charbel. I never say your first or second last name, Claudia Cuento. She is one of our senior partner account managers here at WP Engine, and she is fabulous. Claudia, do you want to introduce yourself?
I would love to. Yes, Claudia Charbel Cuento. Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining. I want to note that Kevin and John will be introducing themselves. I am a senior partner account manager. I work with our partners. We talk a lot about migration, so I'm excited to be here and to showcase to y'all our amazing tool.
Awesome. Well, Claudia, we can dig right in and you can get started.
Sounds good. So in general, a site excuse me, in general, a site migration involves more than just moving a website from one platform or domain to or another host to another. There are a few different types of migrations, and we're not going to dig into all of them today, but as we focus on WP Engine's bread and butter, WordPress and WordPress site migrations. I did want to spend a little bit of time, and as you see on the slides, it's outlined the different types of migrations that you might be familiar with. Content migrations, domain migrations, and lastly, platform migrations. Regardless of what type of migration you or your business might be going through, successful migrations require meticulous planning and precise execution to avoid the pitfalls of performance, user experience lacking, or to make sure you're aligned with a new brand strategy. And we can go ahead to the next slide. Thank you, Lexi. Here you can see a basic plan of action an organization might take. Website migrations typically follow a few core steps. Proper preparation, say that 5 times fast, and execution is important so that you can do things like minimize downtime, preserving existing SEO rankings, which I know are very important to particular brands, and ensure a smooth transition for the site. I'm not going to go into these items one by one, and I think they've spent enough time up on display for everyone to have seen them, but just know that whether it's a multi-site migrations, whether it's one or a multi-site migration, having an actionable plan and backups is very important. So migrating websites, especially at scale for multiple clients, is a complex and can be a complex task with a wide range for error. Of course, this is why we're here today, to talk about WP Engine and how we can help aim for a seamless migration. I now have the esteemed pleasure of pivoting this webinar slightly. We're going to get into WordPress migrations and how WP Engine can help you. I have the honor of introducing you to Kevin Hoffman, one of our senior product managers at WP Engine, who has been in the WordPress space for some time. At WP Engine, we have a few different methods of migration, and Kevin is going to get into the first, which is our do-it-yourself or single-site migrations. I'll let him briefly talk about the managed migration services, but John and I will be back shortly to talk about the service at large and some questions we can answer for you. Kevin, over to you.
Thanks so much, Claudia. So sorry, I'm in control of slides now. So let me drive that. Thank you everyone for joining. My name is Kevin Hoffman. As Claudia said, I'm a product manager of our migration plugins here at WP Engine. So that includes both WP Migrate, which is our standalone migration toolbox plugin for developers who are moving sites into or outside of WP Engine. And then we also have our new WP Engine site migration plugin. And that's what we're going to dig into today. So one of the things to know about WP Engine Site Migration plugin is that it is built on the foundation of WP Migrate. WP Migrate is a WordPress plugin that's been around for over 10 years, started as a database migration tool, and over time added more and more capabilities to the point where it is now a full site migration tool. So with that kind of history and all the learnings we've gathered over the years from WP Migrate, we've applied those to the new WP Engine site migration tool and are ready to offer that as our self-serve migration offering here at WP Engine. So when we talk about self-serve and managed or DIY and done for you, we have really two different kind of migrations in mind. Are you willing to do the work yourself, set up the migration, run it, monitor it, and kind of QA it after the fact? Or do you have so many migrations on your plate as an agency that you may need help performing those migrations and can maybe look to our managed migration service to do so? The DIY solution based on the WP Engine site migration plugin is what I'm going to dig into next. And I'd like to let you know some of the improvements that have recently come to this plugin. So if you haven't run a migration to WP Engine in a while, or you've never done one at all, this will be a good introduction to that workflow and what to expect when moving a single site from outside of WP Engine to our platform. A few of the improvements I want to touch on first, and you'll see this as we walk through the plugin, are site-to-site migrations. So other migration plugins may rely on a third-party service where your site is first migrated to that third party and then migrated to the destination site. So you actually end up transferring database and site files twice, which, as you can imagine, is not the most efficient approach. With WP Engine site migration, we install a plugin on the source and destination site, and the transfer of the database and files happens directly between the two sites. So for maximum efficiency and without the risk of your content sitting on a third-party server, we get your site from A to B as quickly as possible. We also have full site and custom migration capabilities. So we'll look at a one-click full site migration option where it'll move your entire database and all the files in your WP content folder. But we also have a robust custom migration option where you can choose exactly which database tables or theme files or media files that you'd like to include in that migration. High performance file transfers. This is a really distinguishing factor when it comes to our plugin. When you're migrating from another host, that host may not have the most, let's say, performant capabilities. They're able to run a migration as quickly as possible. Or you may be coming from a modern host that is on top of its game. High performance file transfers allow us to ramp up the amount of data that we are sending in each request, such that we start small and then gradually send more and more and more until the server tells us, okay, back off a little bit, and we stay at that rate for as long as possible throughout the migration. So that makes your file transfer phase go really fast and allows us to basically complete the migration as quickly as possible. And finally, the new WP Engine site migration plugin integrates with our user portal. So as we walk through this process next, you'll see that you don't even have to go into your destination site in order to kick off a migration. So you can get in, build a site as quickly as possible, kick off that migration, and then come back when it's complete, and you can really start to do your day-to-day work on the WP Engine site. So let's go ahead and jump into that process. So position yourself in the WP Engine user portal and imagine it's moving day or migration day. You're ready to add a new site. So when you click to add a site, you'll be presented with an option to build a new site or migrate a site. Both of these options will spin up a new WordPress install, but by clicking the migrate a site option, you're indicating to us that you intend to migrate a site, and we can guide you through the rest of that workflow. So you'll go through the process of setting up that install, and once it's done building, you'll land on this site migration page in the user portal. You can see it there on the left-hand side of the site menu. You can get to it at any time by just opening one of your sites and then clicking Site Migration. Before you begin, we have this option to generate connection information. By clicking that button, we'll install the WP Engine Site Migration plugin on your destination site, and then we'll also generate the connection information necessary to connect from your source site on another host to begin the migration process. So by clicking that button, you'll get the connection information and the secret key passed back to you. And then you can step through the step-by-step guide below that content on the page and move into the migration itself. So at this point, our destination site is prepared, and we want to take the WP Engine Site Migration plugin and also put it on the source site that is going to be running the migration. So here we are in WP Admin of the source site. We've just installed this WP Engine Site Migration plugin. And before we start, we have the option to enter an email address. And by doing so, you get updates about your migration as it starts, finishes, or if any problems occur during the migration process. Next, we're going to be asked for our connection information that we just gathered from the user portal. So that's copied to your clipboard, simply paste it in here, and we establish the connection from the source site to the WP Engine site. Once that's complete, you now have the option to click between a one-click full site migration, or you can customize the migration. Now, migrating the full site, as you can see on the slide, says that we will copy all WordPress database tables and site files. Remember, this is a copy, so we're not removing or deleting any information on the source site, simply copying it to WP Engine. We also update all instances of the site path and the URL, including in serialized data. So if you were to try to do this yourself and do a simple text search replace within the database, you might actually end up corrupting your data if those URLs exist in a serialized format. We do it in a safe way that unserializes and then reserializes those fields in order to ensure that your site remains functional after the migration. But let's talk about a custom migration. We could start the migration at this point, kick it off, and in fact, many of our customers do that. But if you want a little bit more control, you can dig into customizing the migration, which will then give you access to the individual panels for database, media uploads, themes, plugins, and even must-use plugins. Also, if you happen to have files in the WP content directory, we allow you to move those as well. Here you can see in the database panel the exact tables that we're going to be moving. If you want to expand that subpanel and select, just a specific post meta table, you can do that, or you can move everything by default. Similarly, in our media uploads panel, you can push all media uploads, or if this is the second time you're doing a migration, you can only push the uploads from a certain date onward. So if I ran this migration yesterday, I could include yesterday's date, and that'll make my migration go much faster as I'm only moving those files that have changed since yesterday. And then with themes and plugins, we take a similar approach where you have the option to push all themes, only active themes, only selected themes, or all themes except the ones that you've selected. So if you want to run this migration on a repeated basis, you might have a setup here that says, I never want to move the 2020 themes. I just want to move my custom theme. And this kind of custom migration approach allows you to do that. Now, once we start the migration, you'll be presented with this progress panel where you see the stages of your migration laid out. So from left to right, we migrate the tables, media uploads, themes, plugins, must-use plugins, and then we finalize the migration. And it's important to note that as we're performing the migration, database tables are moved to temporary tables on the destination. So we're not breaking your destination site as the migration is going on. And if anything happens during the course of the migration, we can always revert back to the state of the site as it existed prior to the migration. Similarly, with themes and plugins, we move those files into temporary directories until the entire migration is done. As you can imagine, if you were to edit themes or plugins file by file on a live site, you could certainly break that site. We make sure that everything is in place first at the destination before the finalized stage in which everything moves in to its final location and becomes the live site. At the bottom of the screen, you can also see there's a migration ID. If you run into any problems, the migration ID is always helpful for passing along to our support team. That can also go to our product team and our engineers if we need to investigate a specific migration. We've worked with a number of customers since the new plugin went live, and we're able to kind of learn some of the idiosyncrasies of different hosts, of different plugins that interact with our plugin, and really work through those issues such that it benefits not only that customer, but the rest of our WP Engine customers as well. And finally, when the migration is complete, it will show a migration successful screen. You'll also get a success email sent to your email address if you entered one at the beginning. Gives you a little summary of how much data was moved and how long it took to move that data. And then you can click view result to jump straight to the destination site and start to QA your site and make sure everything looks right. So that's an overview of the process of using the WP Engine site migration plugin. And it really is the engine of all of our migrations, whether you're doing them yourself or whether our managed migration service is performing them for you. This is the kind of process we'll go through. So I'm going to hand it over now back to Claudia, who's going to tell you about how managed migrations makes use of our new WP Engine site migration plugin.
It would help if I was unmuted, right? It wouldn't be a webinar if someone didn't mute themselves. Thank you so much, Kevin. As we previously mentioned, we're going to round out the conversation before John and I take some questions on what the migration process looks like. You can go to the next slide. Thank you so much. This is just a scope of what the differences in services across the teams are. Kevin showed you a lot about the migration plugin, which is a great option for single or small sites. It allows you to manage it all, do it all on your own time. If you have any questions about this or want to chat further, anyone on our account team would be more than happy to address these. And there are several members in chat who are reaching out and getting information. But essentially, you can totally manage multiple site migrations yourself. However, the bigger the project, the more work, and we have a dedicated team with members like John, who you're about to hear from, that can help take the stress out of your life. And why add stress if you don't need to? And it's included for many of your large site migrations. John and his team have been doing this for a year, so why not leave it to the experts? Now let's go ahead and dig into the questions. John, the first question we have for you is, can you walk us through the experience of the WP Engine migration process, what steps are involved, and how we ensure success?
Yeah, certainly. Thanks, Claudia. Thanks for having me, and thanks for everyone for being here. So yeah, essentially what we like to do is, once we have an agency working alongside our onboarding team, myself or another member of our team will typically be on a kickoff call. We like to get an understanding of the kind of sites you're moving over, be it more dynamic or static sites, the amount of sites, any timelines, et cetera, just so we have an understanding of what we're getting into. And it's really as simple. Once we have that initial meetup, it's really as simple as getting into your WP Engine user portal and submitting a form for each site to get over to our work queue. Essentially, all we ask for is some basic site information, site name, the WP admin path if it's custom outside of WP admin, and then we have a secure intake for you to send us user credentials. That way our team has access to the back end and we can get in and get things copied for you.
Sounds awesome. Thank you, John. We have another question here. How much time does it take to complete the migration of sites? Great question.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's variable. And what I mean by that is, a lot of the integrity and speed of how quickly we can migrate a site Just depends on the the WordPress architecture that the source site is coming from. Certainly, we all know out-of-date things in WordPress can make things cumbersome. So having an up-to-date site always helps. But due to the efficiency and development of Kevin and his team with WP Engine site migration, we've seen we've seen a site that's been sized of about 500 megabytes take a couple of minutes to actually complete that migration process. And then one thing I forgot to mention in a previous question is my team is there to do that quality checking for you. So we make sure everything comes across nicely, the site functions properly. So once we do that final QA step, we've been able to migrate sites in a matter of like 5 to 10 minutes. So if anything, I could say, having things updated certainly makes it easier for our team to move things. But however, we've certainly we've had our fair share of moving old, out-of-date sites, and we like to roll up our sleeves and do what we can in those situations.
Nice. I would make a moving analogy, but I won't. How much effort is required from the client, or let's say the end user, during the migration?
Yeah, so as I mentioned before, really, filling out the form to get that migration request into our work queue is one little effort. Once we finish doing a migration and we quality check the site and we think it is proper, we send out a notification to our customer saying it's complete. However, your websites better than our team will ever be able to know them. We do our due diligence to, make sure that they're functioning like their live counterpart, but we just want you to give it that last stamp of approval before going live. So that's another part that our end customers will be responsible for. But if everything looks good, it's a matter of just taking the site live and pointing DNS when it works for you and your end customers.
Awesome. Thank you, John. And thank you for these questions. We have a two-parter for you. Are you ready?
I am. Let's do it.
All right. How reliable were the migration services provided by WP Engine, and will there be any downtime acquired?
Yes. So one thing I always like to stress, especially when we have, customer onboarding calls, is the plugin that we've developed and utilized is, it just keeps getting better and better and better. Thanks to Kevin and his team of engineers. So it's extremely reliable. However, due to the nature of any plugin in this space, you always find little hiccups here and there. And my team has a vast collection of various tool sets that we use to migrate sites. And I'm fortunate enough to lead a team of folks that have a drastic tenure of migrating WordPress sites. So we've seen the worst of the worst, and we're adequately equipped to really handle any type of migration. When it comes to downtime considerations, the only thing that's really on the plate to consider is your DNS provider. So checking with your registrar to make sure that certain things are set up properly so that the time to life that happens when your domain name propagation occurs is minimized. So that's one thing that our support teams and myself and everyone here at WP Engine is pretty well versed in. So we definitely have some tips and tricks to mitigate that.
Well, we have a question kind of in the same vein. Are there any limitations, and can WP Engine handle a large and complex site during migration?
Yes, thank you. Absolutely. With limitations, as we kind of mentioned at the onset of this meet, it has to be WordPress. We do get requests often for migrations of sites that are built within other architectures. So if it's not WordPress, we're not going to be able to handle it. But we've seen anywhere to sites that are a couple hundred gigs of media content. We've worked with sites that have really large databases. So the sky's the limit, really. And if I see a migration that we haven't been able to do, I'll be excited to learn about why we haven't been able to do that. But up until this point, nothing's off the table.
Awesome. That's good to hear. And it's good to know too, and to note that our partner team is here to help you if you do need the site migrated from another CMS to WordPress. All right, next question. How responsive and helpful is the WP Engine support team during migrations, and to what extent are they available during a web migrations?
Yeah,
Should the client run into issues?
absolutely. So like I said, once that form is submitted to our team, that creates a ticket for our team to get working on. Myself and my team is only available during US standard business hours. So any of that communication, should there be, if we have a little back and forth of troubleshooting where we need some further information from our end customer, that'll be handled during their standard US business hours. However, folks in our support realm are very versed in migrations as a whole. They understand the technologies and the workflows that are needed to migrate a site. So if any questions come up off hours, be it the general nature of migration, things, site hiccups, if you will, or any DNS concerns, you all know that our support teams are available 24/7. So they're a great tool to lean on in those times where myself and my team is not available.
Perfect. Thank you. We've got another great one here. What measures does WP Engine take to ensure the security and integrity of a site or multiple sites during the migration process? Security is top of mind for everybody.
Yes, absolutely. Great question. So one thing that I like to stress too is in that form that you send us, we have a third-party encryption service that encrypts any passwords and usernames, et cetera, that are getting sent to us. And with this service, it's kind of a burn after reading type submission. So we never have any user information or credentials being stored on our WP Engine servers. So that's one thing that we've worked with our security teams to make sure we're in accordance to how we're handling customer credentials, et cetera. And then one thing I also like to just make a note, kind of not necessarily on the security realm, but as we're making a copy to WP Engine, we have some cool rules defined in our robots.txt file that make sure that any of the content isn't getting crawled by bots, if you will, to affect SEO scores and et cetera. So, we want to make sure that the integrity of the sites that we're copying over are being treated with the utmost delicacy.
Awesome. Thank you. We've got a few more questions here, and then we'll get into the Q&A questions. How do migration services impact an agency's bottom line, and what are the measurable benefits in terms of cost savings or increased revenue?
Great question. So, I'll kind of allude to, the WP Engine model as a whole and why we wanted to bring this product offering. We understand that agencies, budget and allocate certain bandwidth to focus on, their bread and butter. Similarly, as WP Engine, as a managed WordPress environment, likes to do so. We like to take those things that we're good at and do that and manage it so that you don't have to. So that same disposition is true with our managed migration service, in the sense we want to take that load off of your plate. That way you can spend your time and resources in doing the things that your business model is successful at, be it design, development, SEO implementation, et cetera.
Wonderful. This one, I like this question because I come from, agency life and resellers. So what are the key benefits worth highlighting for agencies considering the managed migration services pilot program?
Yeah, and we've actually had quite a few customers, kind of package our service and white label it into, their end clients of that. They'll use the offering of migrating the sites into our platform as as a service along with, their whole website management. And so there's definitely revenue options and dollar value to utilize our team that's just been given to you as an offering with your services. So it's definitely something that that has been white labeled and handed off to end customer billing.
Perfect. Thank you. And we have the last of the previously submitted questions, and then we'll move to Q&A. So just as a reminder, if you have any questions for the team, submit them through the Q&A option on the webinar Zoom. After someone migrates a site, are there any post-migration processes or items to keep track of?
Yeah, that is a great question. So, one thing that definitely comes to mind, and we're hoping to expand our team and our services is, we like to make that initial copy and do our due diligence to quality check it. That way we can understand if there's any unique headwinds, troubleshooting ventures, etc., that we can get ahead of. So we all know, due to the nature of some sites, if they're more dynamic, like your membership sites or your e-commerce sites, in that interim time, if you don't have a content freeze in place, you probably have active, customers hitting the site, making orders, etc. So one thing we like to call out when we finish a migration, if you do have a rather dynamic site, we want to lean on you to make that last content refresh. And as Kevin kind of showcased earlier, it's really as easy as getting into your WP Engine user portal and getting that connection information and clicking migrate once more. That way you can get that final resync of the database and maybe any new uploads that you've added before going live. We always like to stress if you haven't planned it out yet to make sure that you do get a content freeze or some sort of maintenance page up on your live site. That way you don't lose any data that's coming across in that process. So that's really the only thing to consider and one thing that makes it pretty seamless and simple.
Perfect. Thank you, John. We're going to invite Lexi back up now to pose some of the questions that were in Q&A. Just another gentle reminder, if you have any questions, we have about 19 that I'm seeing. If anybody wants to submit any more questions, we'll be happy to answer.
Yeah, we've definitely had a lot of questions, and I am going to ask Kevin, who's going to answer a couple of questions. He's going to come back in here, but please send your questions through. I do want to say some of these questions are very specific, and we might just follow up with you directly. My email is lexi.mostek, lexi.mostek@wpengine.com. If we don't answer any of your questions, I'm happy to follow up or loop in the right person to follow up with you, as well as we can share some of these slides afterwards to share with you to clarify anything or get you in contact with anyone. But tons of questions. Please feel free to continue those. And I'm going to utilize Claudia, John, and Kevin because they are definitely more of the experts. I do just want to ask a clarifying pricing question on this. And I'm just going to backtrack a couple of slides to talk about pricing of these migrations and kind of like what the difference is. So someone in the chat asked, is this priced differently for agencies or is it direct to consumer cheaper? I just want to reiterate the migration plugin is included for WP Engine customers. So that is that single site migration. This is an included plugin that allows you to help bring your site over to WP Engine. Again, that is that customer managed piece of that. But then the second piece of this is the managed migrations service that John and his team are amazing at. And John, do you want to just talk about how we're including that, or how that works with the team?
Yeah, so right now we have it, any customers that are on a P1 or above really gets and has a fixed term contract really gets our service offering. Um, so that's how we're scaling it right now because we partner with my team's a part of our onboarding team. So we'll be, we work alongside your onboarding manager in that process.
Yeah, so just following up, like if you have enough sites or you're on a certain plan, this service is something that we're offering to you. It just work with your account manager or your team there. And then somebody else asked a question on, can you advise on proper plan based on migrating an existing site? I know we shared kind of some recommendations as far as like making a plan for migrating your site. I will share that slide and these slides with everyone after the event. But John, can you talk about like how we work with customers to make a plan, to minimize downtime, and kind of like what the team experience is as you work with WP Engine and why that's so great?
Yeah, and that kind of that comes alongside when we have our initial meet with your dedicated onboarding manager, because we understand that there's a multitude of different sites, and some are easy peasy brochures. However, some of those more dynamic ones might require more communication. And so really, the best answer to that is we're always in constant communication, and we understand that there are definitely some more delicate sites in your portfolio than others. So, in that time, we like to, have that information and understanding. That way, we do have kind of a plan, and we do have any understandings of what needs to be done in that time frame. What I always like to stress too is, getting that initial copy right away. I know, for an example, if you needed a site moved end of month, but we're at the beginning of the month, we still like to make that copy. That way, my team has an understanding of, what we're looking at going forward. But obviously, we do understand that in that interim time, be it a month, we're going to need to do a content refresh. And that's where myself and your onboarding manager are there to kind of make sure that we have a plan set and it's executed and we all have eyes on it accordingly.
Absolutely. And Kevin, do you want to add anything about kind of like dynamic migration workflow or anything from your side?
Yeah, I can speak to that also from the DIY perspective. So if you do have a dynamic site like an e-commerce store that is maybe taking new orders every minute, we want to be really conscious that we're not losing data while the migration itself takes place. And as fast as we make the migrations, there's always going to be some time period where your data is in transfer from the source to the destination. So if you go to the site migration page in the user portal today, there's an e-commerce workflow that is great for not just e-commerce sites, but really any dynamic site where data is frequently changing. And we have some extra steps there that will guide you through the process of putting your source site into maintenance mode, or essentially blocking new data from entering the source site database while the migration occurs to ensure that there's no data loss during that process. But as John said, you can get a lot of that. You can reduce downtime a lot by doing an initial migration and then doing a second content refresh, which would be just moving the tables or the files that have changed since the first migration. And that typically is the point at which we say put the site in maintenance mode, because this is the last kind of step before switching to WP Engine and then pointing DNS. So the plan that Claudia laid out in terms of having like a game day preparation, you want to have those steps kind of communicated with your team. Make sure they know that when the source site's going into maintenance mode, when the migration is starting, you can set up email notifications to go to your team, as I showed in the migration plugin. But ultimately, once that site is moved over, then the site can be pointed to, or the DNS can be pointed to WP Engine. And you can bring that site out of maintenance mode so that you're ready to start taking live traffic.
Totally. It's just checking those boxes of being prepared, and having the right resources. And then, John, Kevin, just kind of like follow up on that. What sort of support does WP Engine offer in terms of like failed migrations, or like what sort of logging does one see if a migration fails, and how are we supporting those issues?
Yeah, so if an error does occur during the migration, you get that error message right there in your progress panel with as much detail as we can provide as to what went wrong. I also mentioned you have that migration ID, and that's always a great connection to our support team so that they can pinpoint the exact migration attempt that you're referring to. I would say if you do run into an issue, pass along that migration ID. Also let them know where you're migrating to and from. They can typically pull that from the migration ID itself, but it's helpful to just kind of clarify exactly what your intent is and pass along any error message that you might see. There's a good chance we already have those logs on our end to see what error occurred. But if you do want to troubleshoot yourself, you can also visit your error logs within the WP Engine user portal. And occasionally, if it's a PHP related error on the destination site, you might see the issue that's gone or the issue that's happened there. Some of the challenges in troubleshooting migrations is that the source site is really the site that is driving the migration. So if something goes wrong there, we may need to reach out to you and coordinate kind of getting access to those source site logs. But definitely the standard WP Engine technical support route is the way to go. Just bring as much information as you can in the form of the migration ID and any errors that you observed.
And John, just to pivot that a little bit to like the managed migrations and large migrations, obviously your team handles errors and things, but how are you communicating with the client and making sure everything is successful?
Yeah, great question. So a couple of things we'd like to note. Primarily, when we first start a migration, we're kind of migrating to the latest and greatest in WordPress architecture. So the latest supported version of WordPress and PHP, respectively. So, sometimes, actually, very often we're migrating architectures that are a bit out of date with how things look on WP Engine. So that's where my team does when we do our quality checking and troubleshooting. We indicate what might be causing issues and maybe some quick wins that can um, you know give you the opportunity to get your site kind of up to the latest and greatest. So as an example, PHP 7.4 to PHP 8.2, there's quite a bit of different syntax things that have changed with certain themes. So what we like to do is find any errors that are happening. If we see a 500 error, figure it out, denote it, and cascade that information collectively. That way, you don't have to, our end customer doesn't have to waste too much time troubleshooting and figuring out what they need to update or things of that nature. So we do due diligent documentation if we see any headwinds. That way, you or your team of developers know right where to go to make some adjustments to make the site kind of the latest and greatest, so to speak. And a quick plug too. Um, in a lot of our onboarding meetings, we like to also like promote that like this is a great opportunity. If you do have some, architectures or plugins, themes, etc., that are out of date, this is a great opportunity to get you into an environment where you can actually like make those updates and test those changes without worrying about breaking your live site. So it's a really cool chance to have almost like a standalone dev environment to make those updates, if you will.
I think that question has been asked several times. And yes, definitely a good opportunity to update. And I just want to kind of like rephrase. I did see another question on this. But if my site that I'm trying to migrate right now, we're on an outdated version of PHP that perhaps WP Engine doesn't support anymore, does that mean I can't make the migration? Or how do I go about that?
I can address this from both the standalone and also how my team handles it. Fortunately, with PHP, WP Engine still supports 7.4, and you have the opportunity to adjust your PHP version in your user portal down to 7.4. what we'll typically do if we do have really, if we are migrating from kind of an antiquated PHP version, so anything in the 5 realm, we can still move that content, but we might just have to turn down some things on the site, if you will. So, you know, there's probably going to be some plugins and themes that are throwing critical 500 errors. So what we'll do is, isolate those, turn those plugins or themes down, maybe put the WordPress site on, some sort of default WordPress theme like 2020, 2021, etc. So that way the content is there, but it gives you that site and it gives you the opportunity to start, making updates. And you may or may not need to reach out to your plugin developers or theme developers, etc. But we can migrate it. It might just not look like for like because of how out of date it was.
Totally. I just want to give another plug both to our support team and to John's entire team on migrations and onboarding. But we are here to partner with you. And I think that is something at WP Engine we are really good at. We take a ton of pride in our people. So there is someone behind the desk helping, working with you, things like that. So you are not alone. We are there to partner with you. And Kevin, I think we have a couple of questions kind of on our migration tools or more of like the single site migrations that I'm going to throw your way. But can we use the tool to migrate an environment on one account over to an environment on a different account?
Good question. We definitely have customers who use the WP Engine site migration plugin for that purpose. And you can absolutely do the migration just as if you were migrating from another host onto WP Engine. But I do want to take the time to mention we have a recently updated and improved copy environment tool, which is probably more appropriate for that situation, where you can go into the user portal, open a site, and then you can click exactly which account or which site you want to move an environment to in a way that is a little bit better for that job, right? I tend to think of it as like, yeah, you can use the migration plugin for that purpose, but it's kind of like renting a moving truck to move your couch from the living room to the basement. We perform site-to-site migrations over the web, which is great when you're moving from another host. But if you're just moving within WP Engine, we want you to use the right tool, and copy environment is really the tool that's been developed and honed for that job.
Totally. I just want to call out, Claudia said she wasn't going to make a moving reference, but then Kevin made a moving reference. So I don't think we can get away from that. And Kevin, another question for you. Does our migration tool have the ability to migrate a multi-site?
Yes, it does. So the free WP Engine site migration plugin that we offer to all of our customers, it can move an entire multi-site or a single site. There are more complex migrations, which I think one of our attendees was asking about, which is what we call a sub-site migration. And that is when you're moving a sub-site from a multi-site network into a standalone WordPress site. So say you have a multi-site with 10 sub-sites and you want to pull one of those out and just turn it into a single site install. That's a great use case for our WP Migrate plugin, which is more of that migration toolbox for those who are doing really complex migrations on a repeated basis. But if you are just moving an entire network from another host to WP Engine, you can certainly use the free WP Engine site migration plugin for that purpose.
Totally. Thanks, Kevin. Just combing through the questions, we've answered a lot. I know there are some specific questions. I'm happy to follow up with anyone directly if we did not get to your question. I think I have one final question, which I'm hoping someone can answer. Do all links to other websites stay live on your site while you're migrating? I don't know if that's too specific.
Can you ask that one more time?
Do all links to other websites stay live? I think the answer is yes, if I'm reading the question correctly. But whomever asked that question, maybe if you want to rephrase it, we can.
I think maybe if, go ahead, John.
Oh, I was just going to say, so, within the WP Engine site migration tool, that, once you move to that destination site, So in these particular examples, your site on WP Engine, when you set it up, is going to get a WP Engine powered URL, kind of a generic URL, if you will. So in that migration point, there's going to be some database search and replace jobs that happen that switch all the unique URLs into that WP Engine environment. That way you have that opportunity to see that like for like into live situations, even though that copy on WP Engine, while it's live, like as I alluded to earlier, it's not being crawled and there's going to be no SEO implications because of how we've set up some of our rules. So yes, they will get copied over and changed respectively. However, when you do add in your custom domain to take it live, we do have some really new cool features in our user portal that will make those database search and replaces for you. So that is all covered programmatically and automatically when you do take that site live into your own custom URL. I hope that's kind of what they were getting at.
Yeah, can I dig into that a little bit more, John?
Yeah, absolutely, Kevin.
So when you first migrate to a site on WP Engine, as John said, you're probably migrating to a wpenginepowered.com URL. That allows you to do your initial migration, make sure everything looks right before you point your DNS. But one of the really cool new features added to the user portal that John mentioned is the automatic search replace when you change your primary domain. Okay, so there's your old domain moved over to wpenginepowered.com. And in the process of using our plugin, we update those URLs for you. But then when you're ready to go live, you now want to replace the wpenginepowered.com URLs with your custom domain. And because we now have the automatic search replace when changing a primary domain, you don't have to do anything extra to make sure that you're all set for that kind of change. So the process from going from another host to a staging environment and then going live is really made leaps and bounds improvements over the past few months. I encourage you all to check it out if you haven't run a migration recently.
Perfect. Thanks, Kevin. And I have one final question, which I think is back to you. And I think you covered this, and I could probably answer it, but I'm going to pass it to you. Can you use WP Engine to migrate a multi-site from one hosting platform to another, but not WP Engine?
So that was where our WP Migrate tool is really meant for migrating from any site to any site on any other platform. So you can use it on WP Engine. You can also use it to go from your local site to another host, for example. Both plugins support multi-site network migrations. However, the free plugin we offer to our customers is only meant for migrations to WP Engine or to Flywheel if you happen to be on that platform as well.
Yeah, and I think Kevin explained this best to me as not a migration expert, but the WP Engine site migration plugin is built in our portal and it's meant for WP Engine migrations. But if you have kind of like a suite or additional migration needs across other platforms, we do have that plugin called WP Migrate, which is part of our Delicious Brains family. And that can be used for more extensive use cases outside of only just WP Engine. And the great thing is that our WP Engine site migration plugin was built on the same foundation. So theoretically, it works and operates just like that great WP Engine site migrate or WP Engine migration, which is Brains Pro plugin, but it's just exclusive and available to our customers at no cost within the user portal. Awesome. I think that wraps out all of the questions that we are going to take. I know there were a ton of questions and we are happy to follow up with anyone. I am just going to give a couple of closing words. Thank you to everyone that has attended. We will share the recording both out on YouTube and via email to anyone registered later today. But if you are not a member of our WP Engine Agency Partner Program, I encourage you to join and check out the benefits that are all listed on the screen. This is a great free resource to all agencies that allows you to learn more about things like our migration services. You get discounts on pricing and scaling sites. You get direct referrals. You get an amazing partner account manager like Claudia, who hosted this webinar. So tons of benefits there, and definitely encourage you to check it out. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. And if you are new to WP Engine or not currently a WP Engine customer, we are running a July savings where you can take 4 months free off your first purchase of a website. So definitely encourage you to take advantage. I think we have 7 days left in July, and I will end the webinar. A huge thank you to John, Claudia, and Kevin for joining me today. They know a lot more than me, and we will catch y'all at the next webinar. Thank you.